Rani Chola, I hope I said that correctly, is an award-winning poet, translator, healer, and teacher from Mumbai, India. She has 2 poetry collections, Invisible Eye and The Empress. Her new book, Healing Elixir, the Hawakal Handbook on Angel Therapy, Numerology, and Remedies, has just been released. She is the recipient of the Rahi Kadam Award 2021. Please welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, APWT and Sally and everybody for putting this such a fantastic festival and inviting me. I'm going to start with reading a poem that's dedicated to my father. It's called Leaving Sindh. Occasionally, I feel the loss of place. Leaving Sindh. Occasionally, I feel the loss of place, of inheritance, of a homeland. Not because my grandfather said it, or my father felt it. Just a needling sensation, a homeland of my own. Every day a taste of its savories, in the rich wheat grain cookies, mother packs in my Milton lunchbox, baked papas made of gram dal, in a see-through plastic bag. She packs these too. One doesn't go without the other. Tonight I look at mother's hands, pounding the marble mortar and pestle, crushing pods of garlic. Her eyes have swollen. She hasn't slept a wink last night, grinding her dream with mortar and pestle. I wonder how it would feel to leave behind Jamshed's quarters, the window overlooking the Sindhu, the white sheets left unfolded on a bed undone, wardrobes stripped of its identities, suitcases filled with pangs of insecurity, pretending it would get better. I wonder how it would feel to be homeless. Occasionally I feel like an island, an unnoticed speck, a lost postcard with no address, sitting in the post office with a stamp reading Undivided India. Thank you.
So Gayatri, I noticed that the poems you read, the poem you read is peppered with numerous Indian words. And the reason why I say poems is because you had also shared other poems that have Indian words in it. And I wonder if you could speak to that. Why that's very important to you and why you have an emotional connection with the poems that you have that do contain words like Amma, if I'm saying that correctly.
Okay. Thank you, Didi, for that question. So I feel language is a medium of expressing what is hidden in your heart. And I like to quote from The Little Prince. He says, Antoine's book, and he says, what is essential is always invisible to the eye. So things that are close to your heart, I think that triggers, and that's how you, like if I have to say something, it would definitely be in my mother tongue. Whether it's expressing angst or love, it would be in my mother tongue. And immediately, I've used the word papad over here in this particular poem. And papad is a Sindhi snack that's eaten after every meal. And immediately transports me back to the family gathering and the chit-chat we would have at dinner. Definitely I'm going to use the same word, and there's no other word that would have that punch and take me back to my home. So that's why I've used the word papad. And again, koki is an very Sindhi breakfast that we have. And it's just, I think it's a calling, the word will just, it comes to you when you write it. And that's the reason I've used these words in my poem. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, and I wanted to, I think too much in the past we may have apologized for our using words that probably people wouldn't understand, but I would like to think that especially with the internet, if there is something you don't understand, you can look it up, and then could you speak to that? Like how you also want people who are not Indian to have a better understanding or a window into the Indian culture. Maybe you could speak more to that.
So I was thinking, Dita, should I read the second poem and then?
Yeah.
So this poem is called Sin. So I start with Sachal, and I'm talking about 18th century Sufi Sindhi poet Sachal Sarmas. Sachal rests in the cobalt blueness of the walls of Daraza. The city he never left holds a shrine, in her folded hands, seeking the divine. Sachal breathes in the sienna brown lotus stem fritters, sold door to door by the weary vendor, wrapped in withered paper, time-waft aftertaste. Drained from the chalice of love, intoxicated in the ebb of separation. He comes alive with the folk tales of Moal and Rano, sung by Amma, sitting on a charpoy, smoking ferociously from a brass hookah. She's 94 now, quilting an Ajrak mattress, inherited from the ancestors of her ancestors, ambitiously connected to the land and its people. Sindh, the land of Sufi saints, brazen and stark, a contagion of faith, bellwether of nostalgia. Raise your hands to the Lord in the sky above. Oneness is contagious and resides here. Thank you.
So I think I had gotten ahead of myself. I wasn't sure if you were going to read that, but you did. That's where Amma is mentioned. And maybe you can talk a little more about the poem.
So leaving Sindh is, my father was, I'll give you a little background about it. My father was born in a small village called Manju in a district called Gadi Khata in 1930, and this is way back in undivided India. And the family during, I think, one of the most saddest tragedies, human tragedies, 1947, my family and my ancestors migrated to Indian shores. And I think they carried, along with the rest of the furniture and pots and pans, they also carried a lot of nostalgia, a kind of isolation, and all of this with them. They never really got back. My father never really got a chance to go back and, see his ancestral home. I've just heard stories, and for me, it feels like a dream, and I dread that after my father, I hope I can encapsulate all his stories, and I do manifest that I can visit Sindh once, at least in this lifetime. So that's the background, and so Leaving Sindh was written about 7 to 8 years back, and Sindh, this is a poem that I've written later. It's very emotional. It's an emotional thing. And Amma here is actually referring to my grandmother.
Yes.
And we call her Amma.
Because I think I mentioned to Gayatri that Ama in the Philippines is father. So it's an interesting connection.
Yes. And also the Ajrak mattress. So Ajrak is a kind of fabric that's, Sindh is known for that particular fabric. And that's why I've used that. I hope I've answered your question there. Yeah.
Was there one more poetry? We have maybe
I could, if you wish, if you have time. Just. Terminal. Sitting in the corner balcony of his one bedroom, early morning he's busy. The 10-kilo papad dough needs kneading. Handful of spices must be showered when there are spirits of solitude from his backyard in Karachi. His ailing father pays him regular visits. At his age, he hates to be ignored. He likes his morning cup of chai, hot, almost like the tongue-burned chili peppers, sun-kissed under the autumn skies. From the age of 5, he wears a talisman, copper, metallic plate, cold like the dead body of the cobra, coiled, decomposed, molten salt. Death is a great leveler, nothing more, nothing less. Yesterday, he dreamt he was a child, playing cricket with the boys of the mohalla. Don't go too far, my son. The valley of moonflowers will entice you across the barbed wire. The words resonate again and again. How does one switch off the little voice? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we're at time, but I wanted you to read that poem because, again, it illustrates even further how the emotional connection to not just the your Indian words, but the family, the culture, and how the love that you put into your poems is definitely felt by those that read it. Thank you so much, Gayatri. Now, because we are still in India, I'd like to introduce Shri Kumar Varma. Shri Kumar Varma is a novelist, playwright, poet, columnist, and reviewer. He received the R.K. Narayan Award in 2015 and the Charles Wallace Fellowship in 2004. He edited the fortnightly Trident, translated poetry and fiction from the Malayalam, to English for Oxford University Press's anthology of Dalit writing. His poetry has been adapted in various dance performances, and he has scripted films on the Buddha for the Ajanta Caves Visitor Center. Please welcome Shri Kumar Varma. And you will read a poem, is it a poem? Yes, it is a poem. Yes, and we'll talk about it now.
If you look at the little write-up about this session in your brochures, you'll find the heading is Ansara. Is that how you say it? Ansara.
Ansara, yeah.
That means delicious. That is somebody who's read her poems. That's just said Ansara. And then they've had the Tamil equivalent also, which means Nanarik. Ansara means delicious. Nanarik means nice. So there is a little bit of a disconnect which I found between languages. The force, when you say Romba Nanarik, that means very nice. When you say Nanarik, okay, it's nice. So I read this poem. It's however far you go, wherever you go, whoever accompanies you, finally there is one little solution that you all come back. So that's what this poem is all about, and it's called Exodus. The problem with me is I used to lecture in a college, so I want all the students to look at me and pay attention. But I find on the left side there is a lot of attention, and my head goes like this and looks at everybody. It's okay, it's my problem, not yours. It's my problem, not yours.
Yes, actually, if I may, can I address that, please? I have been told that some of you are here because it is mandated, but because you are here, I hope you will accord our panelists the respect that I feel they deserve. So please try to focus your attention on the poems because really you will learn something today. These are excellent panelists who have been writers and poets for many years. So again, I thank you. Shukriya.
And I know you students are also excellent, so it's just excellent addressing each other. It's called Exodus. The name of the poem is Exodus. We started from the sea. That's a good place to start. To froth and dry, erasing, withdrawing, errors birthed and drowned in waves that know. I've seen death in the stillness. Below, and emerged pure into the clamor. I've seen the dance of storms and raised cenotaphs of remembrance. We gathered more, pilgrims yoked in lustful pain or gratitude to God, who reached the beach, its golden sands blotted with bones of casually felled animals, the plague of spilt oil and blood, picking poetry like shells from under red, dead crabs and rotten remains of sailor-gatherers no one claimed. We trawled the land, on foot and in smooth vehicles, for companions to the promised land, admitting smiles and sneers alike. The journey was the thing. Through still, grim cities overladen with clouds, grey with scorned rain god secrets, and black with a char of self-destruction. Our suitcases swelled with grave charges against static statesmen and polarized politicians, and the easy rage of lazy lovers. We hoarded rants against floods, typhoons and droughts, of thugs brandishing swords to slice through our armors and pull out our gods. Matte bearded men wrapped in soiled bed sheets from sordid lodges in pilgrim towns, red-eyed girls with pummeled breasts and babies that couldn't stop sobbing at the multitude. We started the climb. And the air changed, and our thoughts fell away like leaves from a drying tree. And the sky pulsed with a welcome of careening souls. Help us cope, help us live. The doors flung open to the shrine. Bells clanged, the air cleaved. Any swooned in fragrance, help us, for we are beyond help. We journeyed beyond hope. She stood like sunlight carved by a master sculptor, laughing, looking back at us with our own eyes.
Thank you.
That's it.
So Shri Kumar, I actually wanted you to talk about that because you said that it's about identity, and however far one goes or is appropriated by the other, you finally you return to or recognize yourself. And I wondered if you could expound more on that.
Yes, there's a lot of things. When you look at the poem at various stages, you see ecology, you see problems of violence, all sorts of things, the politics, and all that is mentioned there. You travel across all that, and you're looking for a solution. That's what the pilgrim does. You go away from your ordinary life, your lived life, your familiar people around you, and then you travel. You go away looking for something which you can relate to, which will comfort you, which will give solace in the world. And then finally you come back and it's yourself. That goddess who you open the door, the thing and the sunlight, which is the goddess of whatever you're seeking, whatever solution you're seeking. It finally looks at it with your own eyes. So that's the solution which is always there. Whatever you are looking at, politics or religion or creativity or whatever you're doing, finally the answer is in yourself. Which every religion, wherever they go, whatever direction they take, finally that's what they say.
And you wanted to talk about Kipling's Daughter because it has a connection to the subject, the blurb, which mentions our colonial past. So perhaps you could speak about that.
Yes, actually, this was the last book I wrote, last novel I wrote. It was there's an Anglo-Indian community all over India and all over the world, and the entire thing is sort of coordinated by a gentleman called Harry in McClure in Madras. So he asked me to write a book. There was a huge Anglo-Indian conference happening in Madras, in Chennai, about 3 years ago. So he asked me to write a novel about the Anglo-Indians, and then it would be released just before that, and they would read out the thing. So I wrote this novel, and we spoke about the colonization and the people, keeping us conquered and keeping us as subjects. These are all the ill effects of being colonized. But there is one good thing that happened also. An entire community rose from that. That is the Anglo-Indians. And however, for a long time they didn't have their own identity. They were fighting for it. A lot of them went away to Canada and Australia and very, very places like that. So I wanted to write about this Anglo-Indian community and take one person. I didn't know actually when he told me to write a novel about Anglo-Indians, I didn't know what to write. So after meeting him, I was driving back home and suddenly this name struck me. Kipling's daughter. I don't know from where it came. And then the next progression was, if Kipling had a daughter from an Indian girl, that child would be an Anglo-Indian. So that was the premise on which I wrote this. So it was about this Anglo-Indian boy who started very big and he had a problem and he left his job and he's in this ramshackle building in the outskirts of Chennai. And he finds a book written by somebody about Kipling, how he had a love affair and with a Sindhi girl. And generations ago. And it finally sort of comes home to roost where we began the novel. That's how it is. I won't say much because I hope you read it.
Yes. Yeah, that's a plug for Srikumar. Actually, Srikumar, is it available here at the festival?
The thing is, the other novels were by Penguin and HarperCollins, but this was a niche publisher called Anglo Ink. I wrote it for them.
Yes.
So it's available, you can order it from.
Or you can order it.
Yeah,
yes.
or Anglo Ink, the website.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that. Thank you so much. Now, let's travel over to my native country, the Philippines, which is about 5 hours away by plane, guys. Is it 5 hours or more? 8 hours. Whoa, okay. So farther, but still close enough because we do have similar paths, which we'll talk about later. I'd like to go to you now, Joey Bakiran. Joey is a teacher of literature, and he writes poems, essays, and articles, and he likes metaphors too much, especially paradox and irony. Plus, he is a translator. His words. So let's give it up for Joey Bakiran.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here with the APWT to participate in this literary festival. We are going to read from our works. I will read from in the Philippines. There is this form called the Glee, or very short story. So I'm basically a writer of poems. This is my trying my hand at writing fiction, and it turns out to be like a short poem. Okay. Second to the eldest sister. Victoria, the second eldest sister, did not marry. Her family knew the reason why, including her nephew, Bert. She had a broken heart. She fell in love with a young priest-to-be. She thought she could rival God's attention. She had the beauty of youth then. But in the end, the young, handsome acolyte chose his divine devotion. She felt naked and vulnerable. Her heart offered at the altar of love. Even as she attended the consecration of the young deacons to priesthood at the cathedral, her soul has left the place a long time ago. She could have made a scene, but she bit her tongue. She fell silent. She devoted the time to her family, promised herself not to fall in love ever again. Bert, the nephew, was just a young boy when he heard about the fall of his aunt. He understood why she lost all interest in finding a husband. Bert's family loved her. His wife and children were close to her, not only because she looks after them. Her mere presence made a calming effect, making everyone at peace with the world, all the more during the height of the pandemic. Bert's income used to meet the family's needs. The water and electric bill were paid on time. But everything went awful when the work became scarce. Sometimes Bert went to work for 1, then stays at home for 2 weeks, like Christmas lights that twinkle for only a short period of time. The family income was cut in half. They had to subsist on groceries, shop on loan from the neighborhood store. The landlord made threats to evict them. Good thing, elder sister was heaven sent. She knew how to cook. She never forgot the skills to offer to the church veterans a long time ago. Who knew she could later employ the divine talent as swishing ladles to come up with the yummiest food on the planet? It was a simple affair of a spruce-up table that offered spaghetti, chocolate porridge, and heart-shaped rice cakes in coconut leaves. What used to be a feast enjoyed at a convent now made the breakfast and snacks of simple folks delicious and healthy to boot. She literally became the neighbor's guardian angel, albeit paid with minimal fees to make ends meet, and to make the pandemic life easier together.
Thank you, Joey. So, you said that you are primarily a poet. So, what made you, apparently it says that you write flash stories. This is not the only story you've written, or it's the first? Could you?
I've written stories a lot, decades ago, but this is, again, a fresh start for me.
A fresh start. Okay. Was there anything that kind of inspired you to do it now? Is it because of the pandemic?
It's the pandemic actually because, as you know, in the Philippines, the pandemic is so wicked and everyone stopped working because of the lockdown and everybody tries to find another source of income because the companies are closing down. And then everyone is locked in their own home and thinking of how to earn money. And I was thinking of my neighbors. I'm sort of small souls that.
Just small. Gossip. A gossip.
So I look out of my window and see what's going on around me. And I was thinking I didn't know what to make of my time, and why not write stories about the events that happen around my small towns, small street. So I came up with flash fiction that I posted on Facebook, and it amounted to around 5 or 10 stories, which I submitted to my colleague, and he published it.
Where was it published?
In a journal called VX Machina.
Which is in the Philippines? It's based in the Philippines, yeah.
What made me write these stories is about the concern for people, because there's even an issue among the community of writers that says you can write about the poor condition of people. You're going to use their stories for selfish ends, but I think it suddenly made a turnaround. People are wanting to know the stories of other people around them. So
Yeah.
sort of serve that purpose.
So you are seeing this trend. It is not just you. Are you seeing this in the Philippines, or have you felt that maybe it was from like around the world?
Yeah, in the Philippines, yes. In other parts of the world, I think it's
It's also, yeah.
inspired to write stories about them.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, Joey, did you write that in English or did you write it in Tagalog, which that's our native language, and you translated it?
It's written in Filipino, it's called Filipino.
Filipino, yes.
Tagalog, and then I just translated for this purpose.
Okay. I bring that up because that is a topic that will come up in the general discussion after this. Was there anything you wanted to add, or?
It's poetry and fiction are fairly different because poetry is more intense and shorter. Fiction, I can stop a while and look at the details.
I see. Oh, okay.
I think it's fun to write.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. And last but not least, Roland Tolentino. Tim, my husband, and I have known Roland for quite a few years now, and but I'd still like to read what he has. His introduction, as you don't know it as I do. Rolando P. Tolentino is Dean of the University of the Philippines College of Mass Communication and faculty of the University of the Philippines Film Institute. He has taught at Osaka University and the National University of Singapore, has been a distinguished visitor at the University of California, Berkeley, and at the University of California, Los Angeles Southeast Asian Studies Consortium, and is a recipient of the Obermann Summer Research Fellowship. Please welcome Rolando P. Tolentino.
Thank you. It's an old CV, but I'm no longer the dean of the college that was mentioned. The couple of times I was in India, I was enamored with a realization it's so much like the Philippines. The buildings there, there's a lot of things happening simultaneously in terms of people's interest taking place in one such location or one such event, similar to this panel we're all in, bringing in diverse backgrounds, diverse concerns, diverse aspirations, all in one place or in one enforced event, if you come to think about it. I write my stories or my fiction in Tagalog or in Filipino, and this one is translated by Lisa Gloria, who's based in the US. The title is At the Corner of Annapolis and Aurora. And this is the first excerpt from the first version of the 6 versions within the story. A man stood staring out from under the no jaywalking sign. Outside McDonald's, a vendor vigorously fanned embers upon which she roasted rows of IUD, PAL, helmet, Walkman, and Adidas. Barbecued chicken parts or meat cuts, ingeniously nicknamed after the strange fusion of shapes and cultural symbols they evoke in the popular imagination. Entrails, wings, chicken heads, rubbery chicken feet. The fragrant odors stirred together in someone's pot of rice gruel wafted up. Newly hatched eggs, or unformed chicks if you like, would soon fry to splutter merrily the company of sauteed vinegar or sauteed onions and vinegar. The apples, 5 pesos each, no touching but sniffing aloud, drowsed in their boxes, as did the lanzones, half a kilo, 12 pesos, one tiny free to sample. Mandarin oranges, 20 pesos a kilo, 1 orange free, with every kilo purchased huddled together. Even translucent beads of sago or tapioca had swirled down with the strips of boko, young coconut, through torpid layers of liquid to the bottom of their containers. It was almost 10 p.m. and he was waiting impatiently for the last full show, but not wanting to go home just yet. Some 3-year-olds or so he surmised, not much taller or wider than ukuleles, were shouting in mimicry of older people around them, "Quiapo, Soya, Libertad." It seemed as though the crowd were a swarm of flies that had chosen to land on the rear end of the jeep. And the less fortunate were unable to board the jeepneys, stood patiently waiting for the next one headed for Montalban. They looked like slaves roped into a line. You there, the pregnant dame in red. Everyone turned to look. You can't cross the street now. What do you think you're doing? You should have stayed home. Your husband's probably looking for you. In your 9th month and still gallivanting? Don't blame me if you go into labor right now, yelled the policeman hoarsely from his yellow pork Bantayan outpost. And to the rushing jeepneys he motioned straight ahead for those EDSA and Marikina bound the traffic sped up, trading its souvenirs of black smoke. Outside McDonald's, the Praise the Lord group continued to sing, "Jesus is alive," while the white-shirted, close-necked members circled the crowding crowds, holding out their white donation bags. Thank you.
Wow, that's really a picture of life in Manila. This is in Manila, no? It's based in Manila. And I wonder if you could talk about what inspired you to write this. And when did you write it? Was it during the pandemic or?
It's one of the first short stories I've written, and this was in the 1990s, and things have not changed in terms of this kinds of small nooks and crannies of especially of the urban setting, where there's a lot of things going on at the same time, a lot of concerns, and everything becomes a juncture for diversity, for people making do with that moment of their lives, and people negotiating those kinds of divergently negotiating those kinds of everydayness. Because it's a different kind of negotiation for those who have access to, even in times of pandemic, or those who have access to, well, a kind of financial capacity to be able to have options during the pandemic or otherwise. And those who do not have that kind of luxury of choice and are forced to certain kinds of, are enforced to enact certain kinds of actions because they don't have much choice for these kinds of conditions of the everyday.
So actually, I know you to be also in the film, well, not film industry, but basically in that department. So are you still writing short stories, or?
Yes, I am. If you come to think about the way we figure out the density of the everyday scenes or events is a kind of a panning of the camera, right? The camera moves from one side to another slowly, and then visually we come into contact with the dialogues of various kinds, whether they be the dialogues of the characters or the of kinds of dialogues taking place between street vendors and their customers, and then other kinds of scenes. No? And there's not much of an effort on staging the urban setting, like what they did in the golden age of Philippine cinema in the 1980s, where it's all set in locations of the everyday life. So slum areas or urban streets. No? That you don't need to do much of a production design because those streets are always cramped with people coming from everywhere, and then you just put in the actors. Hopefully they're not too famous that the crowd will recognize them, and so somehow there's a kind of connection between the filmic and the literary in terms of the visual and the printed language that comes with this.
I mean, this really, I think, gave a picture of what you can see in the streets of Manila. You had mentioned being here in India. We had been in Delhi, my husband and I, and now here in Bangalore, we're seeing a lot of parallel images, if you will, of selling fruits by the street, also things to eat, like with the hand, like it's bite-sized pieces. And would you say that as well, Roland, about the similarity between our cultures?
Among other things, no? I think at the ground level, it's a very dynamic, really active, really dense kind of situation compared to and probably some other kinds of films or writing would discuss the life of the 1%, where it's very attractive to them. But it's also a kind of boring existence where everything is so predicated on wealth and the kinds of choices dictated by the 1%, the options of the 1%, which is, of course, always the luxurious kinds of options, the very privileged kinds of options in life. No? But those at the ground level, we negotiate various kinds of plays, the kinds of choices we can make and we cannot make
there's always a kind of morality clause, no? Especially during the pandemic. I want to taste, for example, Starbucks coffee, and during the pandemic it can be readily be delivered. No? But knowing that there's a lot of the 80% will not have access to the kinds of once in a while middle class aspiration that I will have in terms of a very gratifying moment with that Starbucks coffee being delivered, then it dampens the spirit, it dampens the enjoyment probably of savoring a very expensive coffee, because given in the context of the large scale, the weight of the national, wherein not too many are privileged to have this kinds of access, and it's not going to be fun after all drinking this coffee, even though it gets to be delivered in your doorsteps.
Thank you so much, Roland. And I think it's great actually that we make you the last one, because Julian Paré, let me read his bio. Dr. Julian, is it Julian Paré? Julian Paré is a versatile scholar with a cross-disciplinary outlook specialized in Russian and Eurasian affairs. He received his PhD in post-Soviet studies, languages, cultures, and politics from Paris Sorbonne and National Institute for Oriental Languages and Civilizations, NALCO. And I just have to also add, well, he's originally from France, but I also have to add that you have an affinity for the Philippines because you have been there. Maybe you can speak to that, and maybe also comment on something that Roland said about, I believe you're also in film, or are you? Yes, so maybe you could speak briefly about that.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very happy to be here, and I would even say that I'm very flattered to be part of this eminent panel. So thank you very much for welcoming me. I would even say it's killing, as we say in Tagalog, butterflies in the stomach, so it is very touching for me to be here. I have a special relationship with Philippines for a long time, because I would say that I have a debt from within to Philippines and to Filipino people. I think the exact expression in Tagalog is utang lolo, right? Because I have spent many years living within Filipino overseas communities in Russia, in Japan, in France, in Spain, showing the grievance, showing the pain of Filipino simple workers, factory workers, housekeepers, sex workers, queer marginals. And for many years I lived with people, and they introduced me to Filipino culture, Filipino literature. I have read Jose Rizal, Jose Masinson, also a famous communist poet, revolutionary poet. I have been introduced to Filipino movies also, especially even noir movies of the 70s, like Manila in the Close Light, or also to Filipino music like Kuntiman, which is a traditional Filipino song which are a very good vehicle to transmit the spirit, the essence of Filipino soul, in my opinion. So I have this special relationship with Philippines for a long time, and it's like, wherever I'm located, I always end up with bonding with Filipinos and living within Filipino communities. Like, I forgot the Filipino name, the word to say fate, destiny, Pabidhan, something like that. And when, as a scholar specialist in Russian affairs, Russian effort, Rodrigo Duterte became the president of the Philippines, I had this opportunity to take part in the fact that the Philippines opened up to Russia and the Eurasian Economic Union. I could collaborate with the POP, I could take part in helping some Russian companies to get implanted in the Philippines within the framework of the project of Duterte. So I try at my very modest level to give back to the Philippines, to the Filipino people, what they have taught me in a cultural and I will even say personal perspective.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to have you. So now, first of all, I'd like to say that we actually started at 1:30 because all the other sessions before this ended late. So if you will indulge us, we will end at 2:40. If you need to leave, you could go to the side. But I'd just like to be able to give us the time that was accorded us. So now for maybe about 10 minutes or so, or even more, I'd like to move into a a general discussion about, as I mentioned to the panelists, the elephant in the room, which is that the Philippines and India were both colonized, basically. India under the British colony, and the Philippines under the Spanish regime, as we call them, but also, as Roland and Joey reminded me, under the American regime. Okay, so perhaps, I don't know who would like to start to talk about, actually, you know, Shri Kumar, you mentioned something about how, while perhaps a part of us is resisting that, because then that's the other for me, the other, and then this is me, I'm a Filipino, and yet what we gain from them, which is largely the English language, that is what we use to communicate with you who do not speak our language. And I wonder if you could speak to that, and maybe others can kind of join in.
May I make a small request? Would everybody listen to me? Give a big, huge round of applause to Dee.
Oh.
So basically what happens is there is this perception that the British have sort of enslaved us for a long time. They have also given us a lot of things like the railways and things like that. But you don't have to be conquered and be slaves to give ourselves railways. We could have done that ourselves. What happened was actually you take a roll of cloth and tie it around tightly. And then after about 10-15 minutes you remove that, this will bounce back and become larger than it was before. So that is what has happened actually now to all the countries where the British were. Now they have sort of enlarged and engorged and become bigger than they were before, ever. And some of these things, plus the advantages were, like I said, the Anglo-Indian community, which I had a few friends while I was in school and college, Anglo-Indians, but when I wrote this novel, I found that the community was, such a enduring sort of community, which sort of bindas sort of community with a lot of music and happiness and zest for life and things like that. And that's what is there in my in the six. So there is no advantage to being enslaved. Whatever you might say, there is no advantage to being enslaved. But if it happens, it has happened, and it's happened through only about 2 or 3 people, like England and Spain and France, and who went around sort of doing this like a hobby. Went around the world and created little, serfdoms. But now I think we can look back and there's no need of bitterness, but we can, it has not been happy all through. And we threw up our own leaders and our own freedom fighters and all sorts of people who came up because of this. It's not a proud thing for the British to say we made it, but it's a proud thing for us to now become bigger than we were at one point of time.
Gayatri, I wonder if you would like to add something to that. And then I have actually a separate question for Roland and Joey, because they write in Filipino, but they translated it into English again, so you would have the pleasure of understanding their stories. So they should speak to that. Gayatri, you also, I think you touched on colonization as well.
Hello. Yeah. So I'd like to speak a little bit about language. Half a decade back, I started with co-translating Sindhi Sufi poet Sajjad Sarmas. This was a co-translation. And what happens with language and words, I mean, Sindhi is my language, but I cannot, we have two scripts. We have the Devanagari script and we have the Arabic Persian script. And all such as kalams were in the Arabic script, but I found a source which was in Devanagari because I needed that for translation. So what I'm getting at is there's a time when you want to be accepted, so you want to be accepted. That's why we probably use English and let go of our mother tongue. And then there's a time when you also want to have your identity. It's a balance you have to keep between two. So coming back to that translation, I eventually, that was a very riveting journey where I was translating Sajjad. And so I guess where translation is that you learn something, and so with those words, because this was his 18th century, so the vocabulary was absolutely different. So I'm thankful to my co-translator who helped me, and so that's the thing with language, that's what it is.
Thank you. What I love too is that in your poems, you had used all these words, and Roland has done it as well. Joey, I'm not sure if you've written poems that are in English but still have some Tagalog words. I do it as well. It's really also our way of opening our world to your world. And again, like I mentioned, if you do not understand a word, you can look it up on the internet and your life becomes much richer because of that. For Roland and Joey, maybe I should si Joey na muna. Joey first. Joey, si Roland muna. Because Roland, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a time when you were talagang really sort of like, I guess I would like to call you a purist, like when you spoke Tagalog, it was pure Tagalog. I have to explain that the Filipino language currently that we speak, I guess colloquially, has many Spanish words. Correct me if I'm wrong, Roland, there was a time that you would speak pure Tagalog. If I call this la mesa, which is a Spanish word, it would be hapagkainan in Tagalog. And I wonder, where are you now with this, Roland?
I was formerly affiliated with a department similar to Joey, which is the Department of Filipino and Philippine Literature. And of course, there is a rule that when you're learning to write in Filipino, then it has to be a formal Filipino, the elegant Filipino. And therefore, a lot of things would, and the rule is that if there is a Filipino word for it, a foreign word, then the preference is to use the Filipino word. But down the line, of course, when you say hapagkainan, no one will understand you. To refer to the dining table, so you just say the dining table. It's more of a pragmatic kind of language now. Filipino is, it's more open. And then instead of saying, for example, social media, or you say social media, and not anymore panlipunang media. Because no one will understand the currency of social media, or even the need to translate websites or likes on Facebook or Twitter, etc. So it has opened up, and similarly with a lot of language. Even the English language has adopted kilig, which Julian has mentioned as part of the Oxford Dictionary. And it grows every year. The updates on the English language is growing every year because of a lot of local words from various languages coming into contact with the English language and having a kind of a permanent resident inclusion in that dictionary.
Yeah. Thank you. And Joey, would you like to add to that?
That's right. The Filipino language is welcoming all contributions, even from in our vocabulary. There are many Hindi Indian words. You know, we can list it down like budhi. Yeah. So we welcome from Tagalog is a welcoming language, and English and Spanish is full of it. But then there is this style called maybe Didal is referring to the old which you cannot understand anymore. It's basically literary. That means it comes from Francisco Balagtas, the great poet, and that style of language actually is influenced by the Latinized style. So it's really a great battle between the modern style and the old style, the literary style and the colloquial style. It's all happening in the Philippines. That's why it's an exciting field, linguistic and rather social linguistic.
And just, yes, you'd like to add something, Sri Kumar?
Actually, translation, I've done just one for that Oxford University Press from the Malayalam to the English. I translated. That's my mother tongue, and this is the tongue I used to. English was my spoken language, but still I had problems because I was translating Dalit stories. Poetry and short stories, so it's completely different. But I have another big problem, which is I write plays. So when they produce this thing on theatre on stage, I write about some completely rural, localized stuff. And how do you translate that to an audience of different, coming from different language areas and cultures and things like that? That is something which I need to crack with every play. Yeah. Symbolism and ritual and even the spoken sort of thing. That's something I found not with translation but with theatre.
I wish we could continue this discussion, but I think we have a few minutes to open the floor to some questions.
With my students back in New York, I use an essay by Binyavanga Wayanina called How to Write About Africa, in which he draws on every cliche that Westerners have used to write about Africa. Always included a giraffe, always include a child with a fly crawling over its eyeball, one kind of insulting stereotype after another. What cliches do Westerners use to describe India or the Philippines? How would you do how to write about India, how to write about the Philippines from that kind of satirical angle? And be vicious.
The image of, I think, trains with those loads of people and then snakes and elephants, and that's still, I don't know. They always have a picture of trains with lots of people on top of it. Yeah, that's not...
No longer, ma'am. No longer. Yes, actually, they look at India for writing. The snake story is over. And other Silicon Valley companies, Indians, I think my personal experience is there's a lot of respect for Indians. So the snake story is no longer valid.
Actually, the story which I'm just finishing now, it's called Indian Scotch. It's about a person who was in Scotland as a Charles Wallace Fellow in 2004. And 10 years later, there is this Scottish girl who follows him, who comes to find traces of him, his writing and researching his thing and coming back to India and to Kerala. Actually, I was there in 2004 as Charles Wallace Fellow. So, the knowledge of this person's writing, I mean, what she gleans from this person's writing is what she thinks India is all about. But you have to come there and you have to immerse yourself in this life, in the life around them, and it takes a long, it's not so easy. You cannot, it's not just the words or the language or the images that are there, but you have to know about it. For us, it's easier because we were conquered by the English. And from school, we were talking about how the English people live. We were talking about Jack and Jill went up the hill and fetch. All sorts of things that we had to learn. So we have a fairly good idea of what went on there. They don't have a good idea of what really happens in India.
Now, can I just answer for the Philippines? It's a really vicious representation, Tim. Probably more so in film, wherein you have a picture of a character of a mail order bride popping ping pongs from her vagina in supposedly a fun travel film called Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. But that was in the 2000. But now there's a lot more sensitivity to it, but it's still Filipino characters were flushed into migrant work. So the mail order bride is that one kind of figure in the 2000. Now it's a domestic worker. So I've just seen a 2022 film called Nasibo, which is a horror film, and in which a Filipino caregiver character, the nanny, uses voodoo-style, local Cebuano kind of healing and transforms the lives of the family in which she is working for into a kind of horrific life as to avenge for the death of her daughter in a garment factory, which was pointed out to the wife of the Irish household in which she was serving as a kind of a designer and enforcing this very hostile working environment in faraway Cebu to be able to bring in the quotas for the children's clothing that she was designing for. So it's that kind of, it's caregivers now for elderly people in Japan, in which the Filipina becomes a supporting character. So it's all these characters now, because primarily driven by migrant work, but they're not human characters. I mean, they're not up to par with the lead character, the density of the humanity of the lead characters. They're all dispensable characters to enforce a horror story, to enforce a melodramatic story about aging in Japan. So they become very accessorial rather than integral to the storytelling. It just so happens we're Filipinos in this kind of diasporic universe of workers, similar to Indians, Mexicans, and Chinese, all enforced, these are working class, all enforced into labor export.
Having this very enlightening discussion, because I don't know if I would be eligible or right person to ask this question or not, but I am very lean towards film studies, and I have watched few of the Filipino movies as well, and one have been very close to me, that is Manila in the Claws of the Light. So in that movie, I have seen, and I screened that movie one at a time in our film club as well, and in that time, there was this main nuance, and that movie was made in 1975, and now we are in the current situation where almost 25 plus 27, almost 47 years away from that one, but still this idea that how people in a small town, they have a very glorious idea of big towns and everything, and that's still this idea that how we have been uncolonized by many of the colonies altogether, but still our mind is still colonized towards the idea that how small town life is not satisfying enough, and we have to move towards bigger town. Coming from same small town as well, I feel the same kind of mindset is still going on in India as well, that we think that in order to achieve bigger ideas, in order to achieve big name and big profession, we have to move to bigger city. So this bridge which I have seen in this movie, and which I still feel is very pertinent in our society, how would you like to maybe address that? Because even if we have, you know, almost 45 years away from that movie, we still are in the same loop. So maybe some highlight on that one maybe.
It's a difficult question because it somehow relates also to what I've been saying about movements of people. Like the lead character moves from is trafficked. The female character is trafficked to work as a sex worker in Manila, and then the lead male character follows her here in pursuit of love and of course to be able to bring her back to. And the Chinese character, the antagonist in the story, it also is brought about by looking for a better life from what was there in China, and transforming that kind of life within the ghettoized place called Chinatown within Metro Manila. So similarly, there are a lot of accidental movements now, very particularized kinds of professions or identities. For example, in the Philippines, there are 150,000 Indians in Metro Manila alone, and they come from the south of India, coming from this place until down to the south, no? And they're known to become money lenders or microfinancers. That's a niche profession. And it's not a surprising profession that why all the southern Indians are coming to the Philippines. It's also seeking better life, and those are the opportunities afforded by the Filipinos, by the Philippines. Whereas those compared to Malaysia or the ones, the South Asians that go to Malaysia or Singapore, also have niche professions in the construction boom in Singapore or probably in Malaysia, the nannies if they're women, or caregivers, or domestic workers if they're women, etc. So much in the same way the Filipinos were also pigeonized in terms of profession. So these are no historical accidents, but kind of all pointing back to the idea of migration work, in which those professions that do not that are considered demeaning, monotonous, etc., are being subscribed in by people coming from elsewhere. And probably that's also happening in India, where there's not much of an attraction. As I just checked the statistics of how many Filipinos are in India, and there are just 3,500 Filipinos. So it's also no accident that there's not much of a kind of economic contact between the Philippines and India, but more so it's coming in trickles. Although also in terms of a historical accident in which Madras soldiers who were escaping the British rule decided when Britain also, or England also invaded Manila in the 1700s, to stay put in Manila. So you have kind of that community of Indian community starting off and blending with the nation, and that's of course where the Tagalog words, the Indian words came into the language of the Philippines.